Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Titan, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. 3 years ago, this war had started over mining rights in the border systems. Now it had grown into something much bigger. The Hegemony Alliance wanted to push humanity back to their home system. They said humans were too young, too dangerous to be trusted with territory near civilized space. Sarah disagreed, but she followed the rules. All human commanders did. The Galactic Council had given humanity a seat at the table only 5 years ago. They were the newest members, the baby species trying to prove they belonged with the old powers. Every battle, every decision, every move had to show that humans could be trusted to fight like civilized beings. "Admiral, we have incoming transmission from Hegemony Command," said Lieutenant Park from the communications station. "Put it through," Sarah replied. The screen flickered, showing Commander Thex, the Hegemony leader for this sector. His forearms moved in what humans had learned was their version of a formal greeting. "Admiral Chen, we offer you terms for withdrawal from the Kepler system. Your forces may retreat with full honors. No pursuit will follow." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Commander Thex, I appreciate the offer, but my orders are to hold this position. Perhaps you would consider withdrawing your forces instead?" Thex made a sound like clicking rocks. It was hegemony laughter. "You humans are brave, but foolish. We have twice your numbers and better position. Accept the terms while they are offered." "I must decline," Sarah said. "But I want you to know that if surrender becomes necessary, we will follow all proper protocols. We expect the same courtesy." "Of course," Thex replied. "We are not animals. The conventions will be observed." The transmission ended. Sarah turned to her tactical officer. "Colonel Martinez, what's our status?" 17 ships ready for battle. The Hegemony has 32. But they're spread out protecting the mining stations. If we hit them fast and focus our attack, we can take out their heavy units before they can group up. Sarah shook her head. "No. We follow the conventions. We'll announce our attack plan. Give them time to evacuate civilian workers, and only target military installations. We do this right." Colonel Martinez looked frustrated but nodded. This was how humans had fought for 3 years. They announced their moves, followed every rule, treated prisoners well, and never targeted civilians. Other species in the galaxy had started calling it the Model War. Military academies across civilized space were studying human tactics as examples of proper conduct. The battle for Kepler Station lasted 6 hours. Human ships moved in careful formations, broadcasting their intentions before each attack run. When Hegemony fighters were disabled, human rescue ships picked up the survivors. When mining platforms surrendered, human marines boarded them gently and processed the workers according to galactic prisoner conventions. Admiral Chen watched her ships take damage they could have avoided if they had attacked without warning. She watched good soldiers die because they gave the enemy time to prepare. But she also watched the galactic news feeds praising human conduct. The reporters talked about honor, about civilization, about how this was the way intelligent species should settle their differences. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park called out. "We're getting a priority message from Earth Command." Sarah moved to her private comm station. General Marcus Steele appeared on the screen. His face looked tired. Behind him, she could see the flags of all the human colonies, including the 3 new ones established this year. "Sarah, how are things out there?" "Following the book, sir. We took Kepler Station today, but at higher cost than necessary. The conventions require us to telegraph our moves. It's getting people killed." Steele nodded slowly. "I know. But Earth Command is getting reports that our conduct is impressing the Council. There's talk about expanding our territory rights, maybe even getting a seat on the Security Committee. The political benefits are worth the military costs. With respect, sir, try explaining that to the families of the soldiers who died today because we gave the enemy time to prepare. I understand your frustration, Admiral, but this is bigger than any one battle. We're building humanity's reputation for the next 1,000 years. Stay the course." After the call ended, Sarah remained in her quarters for a long time. She pulled up the casualty reports from the day's action. 47 dead, 112 wounded. All because they had followed the rules. All because humanity wanted to prove they were civilized. She thought about her training at the Naval Academy. Her professors had taught her about human military history, about wars fought without rules, without mercy, without limits. They had shown her what humans were capable of when survival was at stake. But they had also taught her that those days were behind them now. Humanity had evolved beyond such barbarity. The next morning brought news of another hegemony offensive near the Tau Ceti colonies. Human forces there were outnumbered 3-1. But they were following the conventions. They had announced their defensive positions, allowed civilian evacuation, and requested neutral observers to monitor the battle for compliance with galactic law. The hegemony accepted all conditions. They even sent their own observers to ensure the humans followed proper conduct. It would be a clean fight, a civilized war, exactly the kind that made the galaxy proud of its advanced moral development. Admiral Chen prepared her fleet for another deployment. They would jump to Tau Ceti, relieve the defenders, and continue this careful dance of controlled violence. The war would continue, month after month, year after year, with both sides following the ancient rules that kept conflicts from becoming the total wars of primitive species. She never imagined that in just a few weeks, those rules would become humanity's greatest weakness instead of their greatest strength. She never thought that following the conventions perfectly would lead to the greatest military disaster in human history, and she certainly never imagined that the galaxy's praise for human civilization was about to turn into terror at human savagery. The war continued according to plan. The rules were followed. The galaxy watched and approved. Everything was going exactly as civilized species expected it should. The attack on Kepler Station was supposed to be humanity's greatest victory. Admiral Sarah Chen had planned every detail according to galactic conventions. 43 human ships approached the massive hegemony fortress, broadcasting surrender terms in 17 different languages. Civilian evacuation ships waited at safe distances. Neutral observers from 4 different species monitored the battle to ensure both sides followed the rules. Sarah stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. Remember, we target military installations only. Weapons platforms, shield generators, and command centers. The civilian sections are off limits. Any ship that targets non-military areas will answer to me personally. Understood, Admiral, came the replies from her captains. These were good people, trained in the finest traditions of civilized warfare. They would rather die than violate the conventions that made them different from the brutal species of the galaxy's dark past. Commander Thex appeared on the communication screen. His forearms moved in what Sarah now recognized as agitation. Admiral Chen, your fleet is in violation of hegemony space. We offer final terms for withdrawal. Commander Thex, we are conducting legal military operations under Article 15 of the Galactic Warfare Convention. We have announced our intentions, allowed civilian evacuation, and provided neutral observers. We request your surrender to avoid unnecessary loss of life. Thex's translator device struggled with his rapid speech. You will regret this action, human. Some things are more important than your precious conventions. The transmission cut off. Sarah felt uneasy about his final words, but she had a battle to fight. All ships, begin the attack. Remember the targeting restrictions. Human ships moved forward in perfect formation. Their weapons fired with surgical precision, hitting only approved targets. When hegemony fighters launched, human pilots followed engagement protocols, giving enemy ships chances to surrender before destroying them. When a hegemony destroyer lost power, human rescue ships immediately moved to assist with evacuation. The battle was going perfectly. Too perfectly. Sarah realized the hegemony was barely fighting back. Their ships were retreating toward the station, instead of engaging her fleet. Their defensive positions seemed designed to pull human forces closer to Kepler Station, rather than keep them away. Colonel Martinez, something's wrong here. The hegemony isn't fighting like they usually do. They're drawing us in. Martinez studied his displays. I see it too, Admiral. Should we pull back? Sarah hesitated. Pulling back would mean violating their announced battle plan. The neutral observers would report that humanity had failed to follow their own declared intentions. It would look like cowardice or, worse, dishonesty. No, we follow the plan. But keep scanning for surprises. The human fleet moved closer to Kepler Station. Sarah watched her ships methodically destroy the outer defenses. Everything was going according to galactic law. The neutral observers were already sending positive reports about human conduct. Earth Command would be pleased. Then Commander Thex appeared again on her screen. His expression had changed. Where before he had shown anger or frustration, now he looked sad. Almost apologetic. Admiral Chen, I want you to know that I have great respect for you and your people. You fight with honor. You follow the conventions even when it costs you victories. The galaxy needs species like yours. Thank you, Commander. It's not too late to surrender. We will treat your people well. That is not possible. My superiors have made a different decision. They say the human expansion must be stopped, no matter the cost. I am sorry, Admiral. Please forgive us for what comes next. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Commander, what are you talking about? The conventions were written by species that never faced extinction. They are luxuries for races with multiple worlds, multiple fleets, multiple chances. The hegemony has only this stronghold left. Our leaders have decided that following your rules means certain death. So we will break every rule to survive. Commander, don't do anything you'll regret. We can negotiate. The negotiation is over, Admiral. Our fusion reactors are now set to overload. Your fleet is too close to escape the blast radius. In 30 seconds, Kepler Station will explode with the force of a small star. Your ships will be destroyed. More importantly, the explosion will be large enough to sterilize the 3 civilian colonies in nearby systems. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. You can't be serious. Those colonies have civilians, families, children, over 2 million people. I know, Thex said quietly. But your government will not accept our surrender unless we are completely broken. This will break us. And it will break you too. Perhaps then, real negotiations can begin. Sarah screamed orders across her ship. All vessels, emergency retreat. Maximum power to engines. Get us away from the station now. But it was too late. Human ships had followed the conventions perfectly, moving into optimal attack positions exactly as announced. They were too close, moving too slowly, following predictable patterns that made rapid retreat impossible. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Kepler Station became a new sun for 17 seconds before the fusion reaction finally burned out. The 43 ships of Admiral Chen's fleet simply ceased to exist. So did the hegemony station. So did the 3 human colonies that had been marked as protected zones under galactic law. Sarah Chen survived because her ship was at the very edge of the blast zone. Half her crew died from radiation. The other half would die slowly over the next few days. She floated in space for 6 hours before rescue ships arrived, watching the glow where 3 human worlds used to be. The galaxy's reaction was swift and predictable. The Galactic Council condemned the hegemony action in the strongest possible terms. They imposed trade sanctions. They demanded reparations. They called for restraint on all sides. They did absolutely nothing that would actually punish the species that had just murdered almost 3 million human beings. From her hospital bed on Earth, Admiral Chen watched the news broadcasts. Alien politicians talked about the need for calm. They spoke of cycles of violence and the importance of not escalating conflicts. They praised humanity's continued restraint in the face of tragedy. The hegemony announced that the explosion had been an accident. They claimed their reactors had malfunctioned during the battle. They expressed regret for the civilian casualties but insisted they bore no responsibility for human ships being in the blast zone during a military engagement. The Council accepted this explanation. They called for an investigation that would take years to complete. They suggested that both sides step back and consider peaceful solutions. Admiral Chen realized she was crying, but she wasn't sure if it was from grief or rage. She had followed every rule. She had done everything right. She had proven that humanity could be trusted to fight civilized wars. And 3 million people were dead because she had been civilized instead of effective. General Steele visited her a week later. His face looked older, harder. "How are you feeling, Admiral?" "Like we've been played for fools, sir. They killed 3 million of our people, and the galaxy is treating it like an unfortunate accident." Steele nodded slowly. "The political situation is complicated. Earth Command is under pressure to respond proportionally, but we're also being warned that any violation of the conventions will cost us our council seat." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "Sir, what if our council seat isn't worth 3 million lives?" General Steele was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Colder. "Admiral, how quickly can you get back to active duty?" "Give me 2 weeks, sir. You'll have a new fleet waiting. We're going to continue this war. But Sarah..." He paused at the door. "Start thinking about what victory really means. I'm not sure the conventions are serving humanity's interests anymore." After he left, Sarah stared at the ceiling and thought about Commander Thex. He had seemed genuinely sorry about what was going to happen, but he had done it anyway, because his species' survival was more important than galactic law. Maybe it was time for humanity to learn the same lesson. 6 months later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UES Retribution. The name had not been chosen by accident. Through the main screen, she could see the lights of hegemony patrol ships near the ruins of New Geneva Colony. The aliens were following standard procedures, maintaining their formations, broadcasting the usual challenges and demands for identification. They had no idea what was about to happen. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park said from his station, "Hegemony Commander Voss is requesting communication. Put him through." The screen showed a familiar alien face. Commander Voss had been Thex's second-in-command during the Kepler Station incident. Sarah remembered him from the neutral observer reports. He had been one of the few hegemony officers who had seemed genuinely disturbed by what happened to the civilian colonies. "Admiral Chen," Voss said, his translator creating formal tones. "I was sorry to hear about your losses at Kepler. Commander Thex spoke highly of you before his death in the reactor accident." Sarah almost smiled. Thex hadn't died in any reactor accident. He had been executed by his own superiors for expressing regret about the civilian deaths. Human intelligence had confirmed this weeks ago, but the galaxy pretended not to know such details. "Thank you for your sympathy, Commander. I have a message to deliver to you and your fleet." "Of course, Admiral. Are you here to discuss new terms for the sector?" "No. Commander, I'm here to inform you that the rules have changed." Sarah gestured to Lieutenant Park, who opened a channel to all ships in the system, both human and hegemony. Her words would be broadcast across the galaxy within hours. "To all hegemony forces, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Alliance Fleet. 6 months ago, your people used illegal weapons to murder 3 million human civilians. The Galactic Council condemned this action but imposed no real consequences. You learned that human lives have no value under the conventions you claim to follow." She paused, watching Voss's expression change from confusion to alarm. "Therefore, humanity hereby withdraws from all galactic warfare protocols. We will no longer announce our attacks. We will no longer limit our targets to military installations. We will no longer offer terms for surrender. We will no longer follow any convention that treats this as a civilized conflict between civilized species." Commander Voss leaned forward, his forearms moving frantically. "Admiral, surely you cannot be serious. The conventions exist to protect the weak from the strong," Sarah interrupted. "But you taught us that we are the weak ones. You showed us that following the rules just means watching our people die. While the galaxy offers empty words, we learned your lesson, Commander. We learned it very well." She nodded to Colonel Martinez at the tactical station. Around the system, human ships that had been following predictable patrol routes suddenly changed course. Their movements became sharp, aggressive, unpredictable. Weapon systems that had been powered down according to peacetime protocols came online with an energy signature that made hegemony sensors scream warnings. All human vessels, Sarah broadcast on military frequencies. You are authorized to engage any target that poses a threat to human interests. There are no restrictions on weapons use. There are no protected zones. There are no rules except victory. The first hegemony ship died before its crew realized the war had restarted. A human destroyer, moving faster than should have been possible, appeared next to the alien vessel and fired weapons that had been banned by galactic law for over 1,000 years. The hegemony ship simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the molecular level by disruptor beams that ignored shields and armor. Commander Voss was screaming something, but Sarah had already closed the communication channel. She watched her tactical display as human ships spread across the system like a plague. They moved with purpose and coordination that seemed impossible. Every shot hit. Every maneuver worked perfectly. It was as if the human fleet had been practicing this exact battle for months. Because they had been. Colonel Martinez. Initiate Protocol 7, Sarah said quietly. Martinez hesitated. Admiral, Protocol 7 involves targeting civilian infrastructure. Are you certain? The hegemony considers civilian casualties to be acceptable losses. We're simply adopting their standard of acceptable behavior. Execute the protocol. What happened next would become known as the New Geneva Demonstration. Human ships targeted not just military vessels, but also communication satellites, orbital habitats, mining stations, and everything else that made the system function. They used weapons that had been theoretical concepts months ago, but were now terrifyingly real. Kinetic bombardment systems turned asteroid bases into expanding clouds of debris. Viral warfare programs infected every computer system in the hegemony fleet, turning their own ships against each other. Gravitational weapons collapsed the local space-time enough to trap enemy vessels in areas where escape became impossible. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, every hegemony presence in the system had been eliminated, not destroyed, eliminated. There was no debris to salvage, no survivors to rescue, no infrastructure left to repair. The New Geneva system had been wiped clean of everything except human ships and the space itself. Admiral Chen opened a new communication channel. This one directed at the Galactic Council chambers on Centauri Prime. General Marcus Steele appeared on screens across the galaxy. His uniform was different now, darker, with symbols that most species didn't recognize. Behind him stood officers from every branch of human military service, their faces showing the same cold determination. Members of the Galactic Council, Steele began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 million graves. For 3 years, humanity fought according to your conventions. We announced our attacks, protected your civilians, and treated your prisoners with respect. We believed that following your rules would make us part of your civilized community. The council chambers were completely silent. Representatives from dozens of species listened with growing horror as Steele continued. 6 months ago, the Hegemony Alliance murdered 3 million human civilians using weapons banned by every treaty you claim to uphold. Your response was to condemn the action and suggest that both sides show restraint. You taught us that human lives have no special value under your laws. Steele stepped closer to the camera. We have learned your lesson. From this moment forward, humanity will fight to win. We will use every weapon, every tactic, and every advantage we possess. We will not be bound by conventions that serve only to protect our enemies while our people die. The transmission showed brief images from the New Geneva system. Council members who had lived for centuries, who had seen wars across the galaxy, made sounds of fear and disgust at what human weapons had done to the hegemony fleet. You wonder how this is possible. Steele continued. You think we are a young species with primitive technology. You are wrong. We are a young species with old weapons. For thousands of years, humans perfected the art of killing other humans. We developed weapons and tactics so effective that we banned them ourselves once we learned to live in peace. The images changed, showing technical specifications that made military experts across the galaxy realize they had badly underestimated human capabilities. Those weapons are no longer banned. Those tactics are no longer forbidden. You wanted to see what humanity is capable of when survival is at stake. Today was just a small demonstration. General Steele's final words echoed across civilized space. The Galactic Council created the conventions to prevent total war. You assumed that following those conventions was a sign of weakness rather than choice. You were wrong. And now you will learn what happens when the most dangerous species in the galaxy stops choosing to be civilized. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, military leaders began emergency meetings. Trade routes changed course to avoid human space. Diplomatic missions recalled their ambassadors from Earth. The galaxy suddenly realized that they had been living next to a sleeping monster, and that monster had just woken up angry. The galaxy learned what total war meant in the space of 3 weeks. The hegemony's home system of Rigel Prime had been fortified for 800 years. Ancient shield generators protected the planet from orbital bombardment. Defense satellites filled space around the system's 3 inhabited worlds. Military academies across civilized space taught courses about Rigel Prime as an example of perfect defensive planning. Admiral Sarah Chen's fleet arrived in the system without warning. No announcements. No surrender terms. No time for civilian evacuation. The human ships simply appeared at the edge of the system and began their work. The first thing they did was drop artificial gravity wells around every planet, moon, and station. The hegemony fleet found itself trapped, unable to escape to hyperspace, or even move between orbital positions. Their perfect defensive formations became perfect targets. The second thing they did was deploy weapons that made the Council's banned weapons list look like children's toys. Admiral, Colonel Martinez reported from his station. The Berserker fleets are in position. Sarah nodded. The Berserker fleets had been humanity's darkest secret. Fully automated warships controlled by artificial intelligence programs that had been designed for one purpose: the complete elimination of enemy forces. No human crew, no human conscience, no human mercy. Just machines programmed to kill efficiently. Release them, she ordered. What followed was not a battle. It was an extermination. The Berserker ships moved through the hegemony defenses like viruses through a body. They learned from every exchange, adapted to every tactic, and improved their performance with each kill. Within 6 hours, every military installation in the system was destroyed. But the military targets were just the beginning. Colonel, initiate total system cleansing. Martinez hesitated only for a moment. All ships, commence TSC protocol. No exceptions. No survivors. No infrastructure. Total system cleansing was humanity's answer to the question of how to ensure an enemy could never threaten you again. You didn't just defeat their military. You didn't just occupy their territory. You removed their ability to support advanced civilization. Human ships spread across the Rigel system like a swarm of metallic locusts. They targeted power plants, communication networks, transportation hubs, manufacturing centers, food distribution systems, and water treatment facilities. Everything that made modern life possible was systematically destroyed. The civilian population tried to surrender. They broadcast pleas for mercy in a dozen languages. They offered unconditional capitulation, war reparations, anything to stop the destruction. Admiral Chen listened to their messages in silence. Then she broadcast her response to the entire system. The Hegemony High Command decided that civilian casualties were acceptable losses. We are simply applying their standard to their own people. Thank them for teaching us this lesson. The cleansing continued. Atmospheric processors that maintained breathable air on the colony worlds were shut down. Orbital habitats lost life support and structural integrity. Terraforming stations that had taken centuries to build were reduced to scrap metal in minutes. When it was over, the Rigel system still contained 3 planets, but they were no longer habitable worlds with billions of inhabitants. They were dead rocks with poisoned atmospheres, surrounded by debris clouds that had once been proud civilizations. News of Rigel Prime's fate spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. Military leaders from dozens of species demanded action to stop the human rampage. Trade federations begged for protection from human attack. But humanity wasn't finished. Not even close. Fleet Admiral Chen received new orders from Earth Command. General Steele's message was brief. Sarah, the galaxy needs to understand that what happened to Rigel was not revenge. It was efficiency. Show them what happens when we actually want to send a message. The target was the Confederation of Worlds, a group of 7 species that had publicly supported the hegemony's actions at Kepler Station. They controlled 12 star systems and commanded fleets that were considered among the galaxy's most powerful. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming numbers and superior technology. They prepared for a traditional war. They assembled their fleets in defensive formations, established supply lines, and planned for a campaign that might last several years. They followed every tactical manual, written by the greatest military minds in galactic history. It didn't matter. Humanity had stopped fighting a galactic war. They were now fighting a human war, using human rules, with human weapons that had been perfected through thousands of years of killing other humans. The attack came from everywhere at once. Human ships emerged from hyperspace inside planetary atmospheres, appearing directly above major cities. Others materialized within the hulls of enemy vessels, using teleportation technology that the galaxy had considered impossible. Still others attacked from parallel dimensions, firing weapons that ignored normal space entirely. The Confederation fleets found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't follow any known laws of physics or warfare. Human ships that were destroyed simply reappeared minutes later, apparently rebuilt by automated systems faster than they could be eliminated. Human weapons adapted in real time to overcome any defense. Human tactics changed so rapidly that by the time enemy commanders understood one attack pattern, their opponents had already shifted to something completely different. The battle for the Confederation lasted exactly 1 standard galactic day. When it ended, 12 star systems had been rendered uninhabitable. 7 species had been reduced to scattered survivor populations with no technology more advanced than basic agriculture. The most powerful military alliance in their sector of the galaxy had simply ceased to exist. The galaxy watched the destruction through news feeds and emergency broadcasts. They saw entire fleets annihilated by weapons that turned matter into energy. They watched planets stripped of their atmospheres by gravitational manipulation. They observed space itself being folded and twisted to trap enemy forces in impossible geometric prisons. Most terrifying of all, they realized that humanity was holding back. The weapons being used were devastating, but the tactical reports suggested they were not even the most powerful systems in the human arsenal. Earth's military was fighting this war with training weapons while keeping their real armaments in reserve. The Galactic Council finally tried to intervene. A combined fleet of 23 species, led by the ancient and supposedly wise architect race, jumped into human space with the intention of forcing a ceasefire. They carried diplomatic immunity under the oldest treaties in galactic law. Their message was simple. The war must end, and humanity must return to civilized behavior. Admiral Chen met them at the edge of the Sol system. Her response was broadcast across the galaxy. You had 3 years to enforce civilized behavior when we were following your rules. You chose politics over principle. Now you want us to stop defending ourselves because our methods offend you? The Council Fleet Commander, a 1,000-year-old architect named High Scholar Viridian, tried to negotiate. Admiral Chen, surely you understand that this level of destruction serves no purpose. You have proven your point. The galaxy acknowledges human strength. There is no need for further violence. Sarah looked at the alien who had voted to accept the hegemony's explanation for the Kepler massacre. High Scholar, you seem to believe that our goal is to prove something to you. You are wrong. Our goal is to ensure that no species ever again makes the mistake of thinking human lives are acceptable losses. But the weapons you're using, the tactics you're employing, they violate everything we have built together over thousands of years of galactic civilization. Yes, Sarah said simply. They do. And if you try to stop us, we will demonstrate what we are capable of when we stop playing with training weapons and start using the tools we built to kill each other. The Council fleet withdrew. High Scholar Viridian's final transmission would be remembered by historians as the moment galactic civilization realized it had never truly understood what the word war meant. What manner of species are you? What kind of beings create such instruments of destruction? Admiral Chen's answer was heard across the galaxy. We are the species you should have protected, instead of ignored. We are the beings who learned that the universe is not fair. Justice is not guaranteed, and survival requires the willingness to do whatever it takes. You wanted us to fight like civilized creatures, but civilized creatures don't survive when their enemies refuse to be civilized. The galaxy fell silent. For the first time in thousands of years, every species understood that they were no longer the dominant force in their own neighborhood. Humanity had taught them what apex predators actually looked like. 1 year after the demonstration at Wolf's Bane, Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the council chambers on Earth, looking out at representatives from 47 different species. They sat quietly, respectfully, waiting for her to speak. The great hall that had once hosted celebration banquets for humanity's admission to galactic civilization now served a very different purpose. It was where the galaxy came to ask permission. The Zelkan Trade Federation requests authorization to establish shipping routes through the Vega sector, announced the human aide, reading from the day's list. They acknowledge this sector falls under the Terran Protection Zone and agree to all safety protocols. Sarah nodded. Approved. Next, the Altarian Republic wishes to increase their defensive fleet by 30%. They request confirmation that this expansion will not be viewed as a threat to human interests. Tell them they may increase their fleet by 15%. 30% would make us nervous, and nervous humans are dangerous humans. The Altarian ambassador, a tall being with crystalline skin, bowed deeply. Thank you for your wisdom, Fleet Admiral. 15% will be more than sufficient for our needs. Sarah almost smiled. 6 months ago, the Altarians had possessed one of the strongest military forces in the galaxy. Now they were grateful for permission to build a few dozen new ships. The galaxy had learned to be very careful about what made humans nervous. The Hegemony Remnant Colony requests food assistance, the aide continued. Their agricultural systems are still recovering from the aftermath of the war. This time, Sarah did smile, but there was no warmth in it. Approved. Send them enough supplies to prevent starvation, but not enough to rebuild their industrial capacity. We want them alive, not dangerous. The hegemony representative, one of perhaps 1,000 survivors from a species that had once numbered in the billions, whispered thanks that could barely be heard. Sarah remembered Commander Thex, who had seemed genuinely sorry about murdering 3 million civilians. She wondered if he would be proud of what his people's actions had taught humanity about the true nature of galactic civilization. After the formal sessions ended, Sarah walked to her private office. General Marcus Steele was waiting for her, along with Admiral Park, who had survived the destruction at Kepler and now served as Director of Galactic Relations. How are we doing with the integration protocols? Sarah asked. Better than expected, Park replied, consulting his tablet. 17 species have requested full admission into the Terran Protection System. They're willing to accept human oversight of their military development and foreign policy in exchange for guaranteed protection from outside threats. And the others? 30 species have accepted the non-aggression accords. They maintain independence, but agree not to engage in military actions without prior notification to Earth Command. The remaining species are maintaining cautious neutrality. Quote, General Steele looked out the window toward the orbital shipyards, where humanity's new fleet was taking shape. Sarah, are you comfortable with what we've become? It was a question she had been asking herself every day for the past year. Marcus, do you remember what you taught us at the Academy about the nature of power? That power without the will to use it isn't really power at all. Exactly. For 3 years, we had the technological capability to do what we did to the hegemony and the Confederation. But we chose to follow the conventions instead. We believed that showing restraint would earn us respect and protection. She turned to face him. The galaxy didn't respect our restraint. They saw it as weakness. They allowed our people to die because they knew we wouldn't retaliate effectively. We learned that in the real universe, the choice isn't between being civilized or barbaric. It's between being strong or being prey. Admiral Park pulled up a holographic display showing galactic trade routes. The interesting thing is that trade has actually increased since we established the new order. Piracy is down 90%. Border conflicts have virtually disappeared. Species that had been fighting each other for centuries are now cooperating because they're all more afraid of attracting our attention than they are of their traditional enemies. Sarah nodded. The galaxy is more peaceful now than it has been in recorded history. Not because everyone loves each other, but because everyone understands the consequences of breaking that peace. A new message arrived on her personal communication system. Sarah read it quickly, then looked up with an expression that made both men suddenly alert. "What is it?" Steele asked. "The Catherian Empire just made contact. They're the species that controls the galactic core. The ones who have been watching our expansion for the past year, without comment." "What do they want?" Sarah activated the holographic display. A being unlike anything they had seen before appeared tall, elegant, clearly ancient, with technology that seemed almost magical. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of civilizations that had risen and fallen before humanity had learned to make fire. "I am High Emperor Zaketh of the Catherian Empire. For 10,000 years, my people have maintained order in the galactic core through strength and wisdom. We have watched your species with great interest." The image paused, studying something beyond the camera. "We wish to inform you that the Catherian Empire formally recognizes the Terran Federation as the dominant power in your region of space. We have no territorial conflicts with your expansion, and look forward to productive relations between our peoples." General Steele whistled softly. "The Catherians haven't acknowledged anyone as equals in 5,000 years. The message continued. "We also wish to inform you that your handling of the galactic civilizations has been adequate. You have restored order to a region that had become chaotic and ineffective. The core worlds approve of your methods." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The most ancient and powerful species in the galaxy was congratulating humanity for essentially conquering a quarter of civilized space. "Finally," the Emperor continued, "we extend an invitation for human representatives to visit the core worlds. We have much to discuss about the future organization of galactic civilization. It seems that after thousands of years of waiting, we have finally found a species capable of enforcing order on the younger races." The transmission ended. The three humans sat in silence for several minutes. "They're treating us like we're the galactic police force," Park said finally. "Because that's what we've become," Sarah replied. "The question is whether we're comfortable with that role." She stood and walked to the window again, looking out at Earth's blue skies and white clouds. Somewhere out there, billions of humans lived peaceful lives, protected by fleets that could destroy star systems and weapons that could fold space itself into impossible knots. "General Steele, do you remember your final log entry, after the war ended, about civilization's greatest strength not being mercy, but knowing when to stop being merciful? I've been thinking about that. We became the apex predators of this galaxy not because we're naturally violent, but because we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect what we love. The galaxy mistook our restraint for weakness. They learned better." She turned back to face them. "But here's what really matters. We're still the same species that followed the conventions for 3 years, even when it cost us victories. We're still the people who tried to do the right thing until doing the right thing meant letting our families die. We became monsters when we had to, but we became monsters by choice, not by nature." A new report arrived on her desk. The monthly summary of galactic affairs. Sarah skimmed through it quickly. No major conflicts. Trade up 18%. Technological cooperation increasing. Multiple species requesting human mediation for minor disputes. "The galaxy is safer now," she said quietly. "Billions of people across hundreds of worlds go to sleep at night knowing that no one is going to massacre them for political advantage. They know that because everyone understands what happens to species that think civilian casualties are acceptable losses." General Steele stood to leave. "Sarah, do you think we'll ever be able to go back to being the idealistic species that believed in following rules and fighting fair?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Marcus, I hope not. The galaxy taught us what happens to idealistic species when reality collides with their principles. We learned the lesson perfectly. She picked up the next day's schedule, filled with requests from species asking permission to expand their territories, increase their fleets, or resolve disputes with their neighbors. Every request would be granted or denied based on a simple principle: what was best for human security? The conventions were written by species that forgot what their ancestors had to do to survive. They assumed that civilization meant everyone would choose to be civilized. They were wrong. Admiral Park gathered his reports and prepared to leave. So, what happens now? Sarah looked out at the stars, where human ships patrolled space lanes that had been dangerous for thousands of years and were now the safest routes in the galaxy. Now we make sure that no one ever forgets the real lesson of the war. Peace isn't maintained by hoping everyone will be good. It's maintained by ensuring that being bad has consequences that are worse than any possible benefit. She sat down at her desk and began reviewing the next day's requests from 47 different species, all asking humanity's permission to live their lives. The galaxy had wanted to see what humanity was capable of when survival was at stake. Now they knew. And now they would spend the rest of their existence making sure they never had to see it again. Civilization, it turned out, was not about how you fought. It was about creating something worth fighting for, and being strong enough to protect it from those who would destroy it. Humanity had finally learned to be civilized.